Think you know everything about medieval food? Think again. Historians often love to give us two pictures: poor peasants chewing on stale black bread, thin cabbage soup, and maybe a little cheese if they were lucky, while nobles are feasting on roasted swan, peacock with feathers reattached for display, and endless banquets of meat and wine. But that image misses an entire world of medieval eating: the snacks, the quick bites, the guilty pleasures, the food that people grabbed in between work or travel. This was the original junk food, and it would have made your ancestors dig through their coin purses faster than you rip open a bag of chips. From sizzling fried dough on street corners to taverns serving concoctions that were part energy drink, part stomachache waiting to happen, the Middle Ages had their very own version of guilty pleasures. And here's the twist: it wasn't just about taste. Medieval junk food meant survival in hard winters. It meant showing off wealth and status. And sometimes it even meant getting so hammered on what people thought was medicine that you couldn't walk straight. Imagine walking through a crowded medieval town. The streets are narrow, filthy, the air smoky from dozens of little fires. Vendors are shouting in a dozen different dialects, pushing their wares, and the smells hit you before you even see the food. Frying fat that's been reused too many times, spices carried from halfway across the world, roasted meat, onions, and something that's definitely past its prime but still sizzling in the pan. There are no health inspectors, no safety regulations, no hand sanitizer. If you had a cart, some ingredients, and the guts to scream louder than your competitors, you were in business. The best vendors positioned themselves outside churches after Sunday service when worshippers were hungry, near busy markets, or at city gates where travelers arrived with jangling coins and empty stomachs. The absolute king of medieval street food was the pasty. And no, not what you're thinking. Nothing to do with strip clubs. A pasty was a handheld pie, filled with meat, vegetables, or whatever scraps the vendor could find. Think of it as the medieval hot pocket, except actually designed to be practical. The genius was in the crust. It was so thick and tough it could survive hours in the mines, fields, or ships. The filling was the real food, while the crust was edible packaging. Workers with dirty hands could hold the crust, eat the middle, and toss the outer shell away. Some miners even had special pasties divided into two sections: savory beef and potatoes on one end, sweet apple or jam on the other, so you could have dinner and dessert in one package. Fishermen's pasties used leftover fish from the morning market, chopped with onions and herbs to hide any questionable smell. Farmers had vegetable-filled pasties, maybe with a little cheese if they were lucky. And just like today, what you ate said a lot about who you were. A nobleman's pasty was rich with spices and meat, while a poor man's was little more than bread, dough, and turnips. But pasties weren't the only medieval snack. Fritters were everywhere. And fritters could be anything dipped in batter and fried. Apples, pears, elderflowers, hunks of meat if you were wealthy, all sizzling in ale or wine batter. Because yes, they used alcohol in the batter, which meant if you ate enough, you could actually get tipsy off your fritters. Imagine that, getting drunk on fried apple slices. Oil was expensive, so it got reused over and over until it was more sludge than liquid. The smell of rancid oil clung to the streets, but people didn't care. Hot food was hot food, and fritters were quick, tasty, and cheap. Another crowd favorite was the wafer. Not the light, crispy wafer you're imagining, but a thick, chewy slab of sweet dough pressed in patterned irons. They were flavored with honey, spices, or even wine, and the best sellers had real skill: too hot, and the wafer burned; too cold, and it stayed raw. Skilled wafer makers could churn out dozens an hour, drawing big crowds. The patterns stamped into them made them look fancier than they really were, and they were perfect for a sweet treat between tasks. And then there were pies. Oh, the medieval pie sellers were legends. Forget flaky golden pastry. These pies were dense, heavy, packed with meat and vegetables, and often mysterious extra ingredients you probably didn't want to know about. The crust, called a coffin, was basically a bowl made of dough, so hard it could hold everything together through cooking. You ate the filling and maybe some of the softer inner crust, but the shell often got tossed. But competition among pie sellers was fierce. They decorated their pies with colored fillings, saffron yellow, beetroot red, and even made crude dough sculptures of animals or nobles to stand out. They'd line the same street and shout insults at each other all day to win customers, so much so that watching pie seller roast battles became entertainment itself. And when you stepped inside a tavern, you entered the medieval fast food joint. Taverns were packed with travelers, laborers, soldiers, anyone too poor or too busy to cook at home. The food was designed to be filling, cheap, and fast. The most common dish? Soups, stale bread soaked in ale, wine, or broth. Sounds gross, but it made hard bread edible again, and depending on what liquid was used, it could also get you drunk. Imagine buying soup and walking out stumbling. Brewis was another favorite, bread softened in hot broth, flavored with scraps of vegetables or bones. Both soups and brewis were cooked in giant pots and left simmering all day. By evening, the mixture was thick, hearty, and perfect for people who needed calories more than flavor. But if taverns were the fast food chains, the true luxury drug dealers of the medieval junk food world were confectioners. Their product was sugar. And sugar wasn't just expensive, it was astronomically valuable, kept in locked chests like gold. A single pound could feed a family for weeks or buy you a horse. So when nobles wanted to show off, they commissioned entire castles made out of sugar. Sugar animals, sugar towers, sugar sculptures of famous people, edible, but really designed to scream wealth. One of the most popular sugar candies was called comforts. Nuts or seeds coated in layer after layer of sugar syrup, sometimes taking days to make. These little candies were given as wedding gifts, diplomatic offerings, or as medicine, because here's the kicker, medieval people thought sugar cured diseases. You could be prescribed candy for a headache or even the plague, if you could afford it. And if you couldn't afford sugar? Honey was the sweetener of the masses, but there were also weird alternatives like verjuice, juice from unripe grapes so sour it could strip paint. Mixed with honey, it became a sour sweet syrup that was basically medieval Sour Patch Kids. Spices added another layer of risk. Spiced wines and ales were hugely popular, but merchants often cut expensive spices with cheap or dangerous substitutes. Cinnamon might be mixed with cassia bark, saffron with turmeric, or even colored sand. Long pepper, a prized spice, was often nothing more than crushed charcoal with a pinch of real pepper. So you paid a fortune for what might literally poison you. And people drank it anyway, because it was exotic, fashionable, and gave you status. And speaking of drinks, medieval people had their own version of energy drinks, and they were insane. Hippocras was the king, wine mixed with honey, cinnamon, ginger, cloves, meant to aid digestion but really just got you drunk while buzzing on spice. It was served at the end of meals like medieval espresso, except it left you slurring instead of wired. Cordials were another, hot ale mixed with eggs, honey, and spices, thick and filling, like an alcoholic protein shake. Useful for laborers, but quick to spoil, leading to some nasty cases of food poisoning. And then there was aqua vita, water of life, distilled spirits mixed with herbs. Basically medieval moonshine. So strong people fainted after drinking it. And because it knocked you out, they assumed it worked as medicine. So what does all this tell us? That medieval people were just as obsessed with snacks, guilty pleasures, and quick fixes as we are today. The difference is their junk food could actually kill you. Food poisoning from rancid oil, fake spices mixed with sand or charcoal, alcohol-soaked bread that knocked you out. And yet, there was an entire economy built on it. Street vendors risking burns and fights, tavern keepers feeding crowds with stale bread, confectioners charging the price of a horse for candy, all because humans have always craved food that's fast, tasty, and a little bit dangerous. Next time you grab fries at a food truck or complain about stale chips from a vending machine, remember, you're part of a tradition going back 1,000 years. The only difference is now we have ingredient labels, health inspectors, refrigeration, and a reasonable expectation our snacks won't poison us. Medieval people had none of that, but they still managed to invent a junk food culture that was dangerous, creative, and sometimes brilliant. Honestly, modern fast food executives would weep with envy. So the next time you're biting into fried dough at a fair, just know you're tasting history. And in some smoky medieval street 700 years ago, someone was doing the exact same thing, minus the health code.